But before we actually start talking about China today, I would be very grateful if you would share a little bit of your life experience as if I'm getting this right, a senior analyst for ASIO on China. Is that the correct title?
Not quite. I didn't work for ASIO. I worked for a less well-known part of the Australian intelligence community called the Defence Intelligence Organisation.
My apologies. That's my mistake. Okay.
Yeah. So ASIO does national security intelligence. Are there terrorists in the country? Are there foreign spies, etc.? DIO does foreign threat assessment work, right? So, notably in recent years, how rapidly is China building up its military capabilities, and what potential threats does this pose to us and our interests and our allies?
Yeah.
And to go to the second part of your question, I finished a doctorate in international relations in 1988, and at that point, like any graduate, I rather badly needed a job, and I elected to apply for a job in defence, and they ended up, to put it very briefly, they ended up assigning me to work on East Asia in defence intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'd never studied China, Japan, or Korea at university. I'd done European history and I'd done American foreign policy, but this was 1990 by the time I was into DIO, and my view of the situation was this is exactly the right career move, because East Asia is where Australia's future lies. Mm-hmm. Ross Garner had just published a report called Australia and the Northeast Asian Ascendancy, in which he argued that the growing prosperity of the whole East Asian edge was about to be taken to a whole new level by the growth of China, and that Australia's economy had such deep complementarities with those East Asian countries that we would ride a whole new China boom. And he was completely right about that.
Yeah.
And I was in there for the early stages of that. I began as a general East Asia geopolitics analyst. Within a couple of years, I was appointed head of the Japan and Korea's desk, and I created an interagency group on Japan and Korea. Became known for a while as Mr. Korea. And then I was given the top job as the head of the China desk. And at that point, I thought, right, I'm underway. I then lobbied for both defence and foreign affairs, or either one of them, to foster my development as an absolute gun China analyst, saying that we're going to need such analysts for the indefinite future, but neither of them would do it. They wouldn't give me language training. They wouldn't give me country posting. And so at the end of 1995, I said, right, goodbye. And I walked away from that and reinvented myself in other ways.
Now, you and I spoke at length about this interagency cooperation that you created. And is there a short version to that story, or do we just leave it alone? Because the thing that astonished me was two things that came out of our conversation about that. Was number one, that such a thing didn't already exist. It blew my mind that could have been overlooked up to that point in time. But the other thing that really struck me as you told me that story was the impact that one individual can have within the context of such a big bureaucracy. This is defense we're talking about. This is a lot of people, a lot of money. And yet by choosing to go about it the way that you did, you had such a big impact. Is there a short version to that story?
Well, the best way to encapsulate is probably to share with you a couple of anecdotes. And I may well have shared it with you personally over the years, but
Sure.
They never lose their savor, because I think if you hadn't been inside the system and experienced it, you wouldn't believe it was true. You wouldn't want to believe it. So, for example, very early on, I'm appointed just to the East Asia desk in general, and I started casting around and working the phone to find scholars or journalists or anybody who knew much about East Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly discovered that my colleagues thought this was a strange thing to do, but because we had all the secret intelligence, you don't go talking to academics and journalists,
Yeah.
And the first person I arranged to actually meet was James Cotton over at ANU, who was one of the very few people in this country doing serious work on Korea. And when I announced to my section head that I was going to have lunch with James, he said to me, "Who's he?" So this is the head of the Asia section. He doesn't even know who James Cotton is. And I said, well, he's one of the few people in Australia who know much about Korea, and I'm going to have a chat with him. And he said, well, be very careful what you tell him. And I said, well, I haven't got anything to tell him. I'm going to learn from him. That was more or less on day one. And we could talk for the next 2 hours about similar and even more dismaying incidents that occurred in the years I was in DIO. And so when I eventually left, it wasn't simply because they had refused point blank to develop me as a China analyst, but because I was so dismayed by the shoddiness of a lot of the work I saw being done, and I thought, I can't unilaterally fix this, and there isn't an incentive to even try, because the salary is very modest. They're not going to develop me. The institution is one that I have great difficulty respecting, given the shoddiness of so much of the work. And you only live once. So I said, no, I'm out of here.
There's other things that you could do with your time.
Yes. And I can't forbear from sharing, if I may, given that this is, as you say, a slow conversation.
Please do. Yeah. No, there's no rules here.
There's at least a couple more of these anecdotes, because it's someday I've got to write this as a book, I think, because, I've said for ages, if I was to write up the story of my experience of applying for, being vetted for, being admitted to, and then trying to work with the intelligence system for half a dozen years, people would assume that this was a kind of Spike Milligan satire.
I don't want to go down this rabbit hole tonight, but you have told me the story of the vetting process you went through, and it was genuinely laugh out loud. It was genuinely laughable.
It was farcical. It truly was. Yeah. And, I suppose I stayed the course and worked through it because I'm actually a patient, reflective person. I don't give up easily on a problem. I work away at it until I can get it sorted. And but also it was a matter of principle. My family was saying to me at one point, these people are crazy. Walk away, do something else. I said, I'm going to get this clearance because there's no good reason for me to be denied it. And I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of walking away and giving up. I'm going to get the clearance. I might then tell them to shove their job, but I'm going to get the clearance.
Yes.